All right, hello! Hello, everybody. Welcome to a StreamCast with a surprise co-host. This is my friend Gina, who you've seen in the chat a couple of times, filling in for Django.
Hello.
We are here to do a discussion we've been wanting to have for a little while now. We've just been waiting for the right time. But I see we got Dale and Ian and Sarge so far in the chat. Hello, everybody. Welcome. But Gina, why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself and where you come from and what brings you here?
Okay. So I'm Gina Sanders or Regina, go by both. And I am a podcaster for Unmistakably Star Wars. I joined them, right? Part of the We Are Skate Pods Network. Got to plug correctly.
Yeah.
I joined them maybe 2 years ago, I want to say, after doing a Star Wars on Tap with Devin Cleffer,
Mm-hmm.
the one of the creators, co-founders, and everything. And after we hung up, he was like, "Do you want to do this permanently?" And I was like, "Of course." I was like, "I'm new to Star Wars. I love talking about Star Wars." And then it has been, and through them, I got to meet everyone on Twitter, got to meet you on Twitter, everything. And that's kind of like how everything took off.
That's right. We met at Celebration, but like it was one of
Sure.
those we like kind of knew each other, but not super well, and then we never got that picture. But we're kind of in a
It's like,
picture now.
it's true. That's one of the biggest, like, one of my, well, because I'd never been to a con before.
Yeah,
Celebration was
same.
my first con.
Yep.
And so people told me that it's more about friends and things, and I didn't believe them. And I
Yep.
was like,
I did the
the
same thing.
panels and famous people, I have to see everything. And then after, I don't regret my time. Everything
Yeah.
I did was super fun. But afterwards, I was like, next time I'm hang out with more people.
Yep. That was my exact same experience actually. Um, but yeah, so we're here and we're going to discuss The Rise of Skywalker. I was really excited to get to do this because regulars here will know both Django and I really enjoyed the movie. But that's a little unfair because it has had a bit of a divisive reaction amongst fans. And so I really enjoy talking to Gina and hearing Gina's Star Wars thoughts. And you're somebody who wasn't really as keen on the movie, but has managed to also be really cool about it.
I feel like that's rare nowadays.
And I mean, the same can be said for the more pro side of the movie as well. Unfortunately, some have also been overly aggressive in their enjoyment of it. So I thought this would be a good time, not necessarily to debate or try to change each other's minds, but to just talk about the movie, our experiences with the movie, and kind of break down why fans might have seen it differently and responded differently to what happened.
Ooh. Although I will say,
Mm-hmm.
not that the goal, of course, isn't to change anyone's mind,
Right.
but behind the scenes, we have had conversations where I was like, I didn't like this. And you were like, here's why I like this. And then I was like, guys, I low key like this. Which, like, we'll get into when we like get in the discussion. Like, you have changed a little bit about something.
I
Like,
have.
before it was like, I can't stand this movie. And now it's like, it's a movie.
It's a movie. I mean, that's something that has been a goal. Like, I don't need to make anybody love a movie. That's ridiculous. Not everybody's gonna love every movie, but if people can come to terms with it and like make peace with the movie, I think that's great because then you can at least continue to enjoy Star Wars.
Right. I was actually really worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
It can come up later or it can come up now, but
Mm-hmm.
my reaction to The Rise of Skywalker for the first time was so strong that one of my thoughts was, am I going to be able to enjoy the rest of the Star Wars movies?
Right.
And I haven't watched any of them since. The last one I've seen was The Rise of Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
But much like The Mandalorian and Clone Wars. So I have not sworn off Star Wars. I
Yep.
still love Star Wars. Did not get rid of the Star Wars tattoo. Everything still exists.
um, oh, I think you roboted for a second, but I think you're back.
Okay.
Okay, there you are. Okay, yep. No, we heard you. I think it was just the tail on the left. But yeah. So then let's, before going into Rise of Skywalker, I know just from talking to you before, your favorite is Force Awakens. which is another JJ excursion. But like coming out of Force Awakens, coming out of Last Jedi, what were you like? Where were you in terms of needs, in terms of expectations, like going into Rise of Skywalker?
So I think the one thing that hyped up my expectations for The Rise of Skywalker was the fact that they were billing it as the end of the Skywalker saga.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, this has to be huge. This has to be mega.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to be fair, every time I leave a movie, I think it's the greatest movie I've ever seen. So I left The Force Awakens, I was like, "This is the best movie I've ever seen." Same with The Last Jedi, same with Rogue One, same with Solo, and then after a few weeks, I look at it objectively and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, "Okay, it was really good, but The Force Awakens is still my favorite." And part of that being because it was the first one I'd ever seen in theaters, so
Mm-hmm.
I know that has something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also aware of my outside feelings and outside fandoms because
Mm-hmm.
we had just had the end of Game of Thrones, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm a really big fan of, and we had just had Endgame, and I'm a really big MCU fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, two fandoms down, like one to go. We're ending everything.
Yep.
And so I had super high expectations because of those two facts, like personal outside Star Wars facts also because I was like, okay, it's the end of everything.
Mm-hmm.
These are my favorite characters.
Mm-hmm.
I like all the trilogies, but I'm like super sequel trilogy person.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's go. And
And
then
then it
I was
just
a little let down. Just a
it
little let
happens,
down.
and that happens. Well, it's funny because I tell people I understand not with the Rise of Skywalker, but I'm one of like the 6 people who didn't like Endgame. So like I'm sympathetic, just not with the
Mm-hmm.
franchise, but like I totally understand how it feels. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's just been kind of funny how that's worked out. But like for me going into Rise of Skywalker, I love The Force Awakens. I have a really hard time really settling down with like how I would rank the films, especially because for me every Star Wars movie like has the new car smell for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I love Force Awakens. I was a big J.J. Abrams fan before he got signed on to Star Wars, so like him doing Star Wars was a dream for me. Um, and then we went into Last Jedi, and it's kind of funny because I was one of those people that had my expectations for the Last Jedi completely like shifted. Like nothing I thought was going to happen happened. But I actually really liked the movie. Like I wasn't into Reylo until after the Last Jedi, and a lot of that was because I wasn't convinced Rey and Kylo weren't like going to not end up being related by the end of it. But I was
Yeah.
never like anti Reylo, and I was never like how did you know. But I didn't I wasn't ready to sign on to it yet because to me there were still mysteries that needed to get worked out. And then after the Last Jedi, I was like, nope, I see this. I'm into it. This is fine. But I needed. I'm one of those like Johnny come latelys that joined with the Last Jedi instead of like the true blue since Force Awakens types. And so we go into Rise of Skywalker, and it's really funny because I feel like Last Jedi did everything I thought it wasn't going to do, and I enjoyed it. But then Rise of Skywalker was like, okay, but actually, here's everything you wanted in 2015. And then I was like, okay, like I get why it makes people mad, but I'm like, this is all kind of what I wanted 4 years ago. So and I fully recognize my bias with the Rise of Skywalker is other than one point that's being discussed in chat and one point I think will be the biggest part of our discussion. I also don't like that Ben died. Um, and like other than that, that movie did everything I really wanted in the movie. And I think for me, the sum total of the whole movie over like outweighs that. And I understand
Mm-hmm.
how the sum total of the whole movie won't outweigh that for other people, especially if they don't like the other choices made in the film.
Right, right. I thought it was so interesting just because thinking through the things you were saying, I didn't actually have like too many
Mm-hmm.
expectations, I feel like, going into any of the movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that was because so for those watching who don't know, so my
Mm-hmm.
dad tried to get me into Star Wars when I was little,
Mm-hmm.
and Han being frozen in carbonite scared me. So I was like
That's fair.
swearing off Star Wars. And then The Force Awakens is what got me back into Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt new, and I felt like I was like, okay, everyone else has been here can't like touch anything, can't ruffle any feathers. And so I didn't really have any like super, okay, this is what has to happen.
Right.
Now Disney's bought it. This is what's going to go. So after The Force Awakens, I
Mhm.
had headcanons without knowing it. Like I was
Mhm.
like, if Rey's a Kenobi, I'm not going to mind. But also if she's not, I'm not going to mind.
Right.
And so I had ideas that I was, and from the moment I was like, Finn Skywalker, Finn's force sensitive. Let's go.
Oh, I thought he was force sensitive from that movie too. Like that was one of the things in Last Jedi that kind of let me down, where I was like, okay, but like two people can have the force, it's fine. Like, why is that a big deal? Like,
So I had thoughts that I wanted, but I was like, but if it doesn't happen, we're good. And so
yeah.
I know you've talked before. You were
Mhm.
like, well, when they were billing it as the end of like the Skywalker saga, you were kind of like, well, that means they're all gonna die. So
That
like
means
you
they're
were
gonna
like
die. Yeah.
like you were kind of ready for Ben's death, whether you wanted it to or not. And I
Yep.
was just like, I'm just like blindsided by everything. I love to tell people when they're like, you should know these things. I'm like, I thought everyone was going to survive in Rogue One. I legitimately thought everyone was going to survive. So I'm
oh,
not ready for anything ever.
oh no, it's funny because like speaking of Rogue One, I thought like maybe two people were gonna stay alive just to sell action figures, but I figured most of
Mhm.
them were toast. But somehow I was just so caught up in the movie, I forgot that, and I just remember when the Death Star shows up over Scarif, I just remember going, "Oh," and then it just hit me, and I was like, "I'm not ready."
As soon as I saw K2 go down, I
Yep.
was like, is this what we're doing? Is this real? And then I just like had mouth open for the rest of the movie. I was just like, okay, nothing. I don't understand life anymore.
Yep.
So I
oh.
say that to say my expectations are wild because most of the
Yeah.
time I don't really have any,
It's fair.
except that something really, really good is going to happen or
Yep.
something really, really bad is going to happen.
I think there's a couple different videos I think you can find where I said that Rise of Skywalker was either going to be the worst dumpster fire or the best dumpster fire we ever saw, and it's just a matter of which one it's going to be. And like that's just the vibe I got from the marketing. I'm like, it's either going to be one of those things that you're like, this is horrible, but I love it anyway, or this is horrible, and how did they do this? And it was going to be a coin toss how you reacted.
And I think that goes to say that I think they knew that no matter what, they weren't going to get everyone on
yeah.
board because it's
Mhm.
so many years of like so many fans. And I think part of the thing for me, so all my life, people
Mhm.
have been like, you don't have to like everything, but I want
Yeah,
to be a completionist
I get
and I'm
that.
super optimistic. Even if I like know I don't like something,
Yeah.
I try my best to be optimistic about it. So The Rise of Skywalker is actually the first like so I read some books I've looked at some comics but really it's the television shows and the
Mhm.
movies for me and The Rise of Skywalker is actually the first like piece of media where I was like, I don't like this. And so it was actually part of like my morning
mhm.
process was that week thinking, is it okay if I don't like some of Star Wars material? This is
Right.
strange for me. I don't know what this feels like.
Mhm.
And so that was part of it for me, just being like, okay, it's okay to not like this and
Yeah.
still like Star Wars
It's just like,
and keep moving.
yeah. Well, I think that happens anytime you have that fandom that's really big for you, and then it's like when you get let down for the first time, and how do you respond to that, and what do you do? And it's hard to figure out, and it can hit you at any age, just whatever age you kind of come into that fandom. Especially when you kind of like if you joining around Force Awakens was just like it hit the ground running. There was just so much, and yet at the same time, it was wide open because the slate had been clean. And so that can be versus like I was reading Legends novels in high school, and like some of those are just abysmal. Like some of those, I talk regularly about the time Luke dated the ghost of a Jedi who possessed the body of one of his dead students, and I'm like,
What?
I have seen worse Star Wars, guys. It can get so much more than what we have.
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine if that was what was presented. Like I don't know what I would have done.
I'll give you the summary of Children of the Jedi, which is burned into my memory forever, even though I already read it once like 10 years ago.
I feel like that's probably what I should do. I should go check out some Legends books and just be like, okay, people write stuff all the time. It's okay.
or just watch the holiday special. That's the best way to inoculate yourself to bad Star Wars.
I watched it for the first time like last year,
Yeah.
and because everyone's always like either you love it or you hate it, and
Yep.
so I found it on YouTube and I watched it, and like the first, I don't even know how long, I was just like, what am I watching?
Where it's just the Wookiees screaming at each other with no subtitles. It's good. The first time I watched that, I think I was crying, and I don't know if they were what the tears were of. Like, I don't know what the emotion was, but I was just crying.
Oh my goodness! But I plan on watching it again. Like, I'm gonna make it a yearly thing. But
Yeah.
I was just like, what is this?
We have there's a series, and the audio on it's terrible because it was one of the first things we ever did on the channel. But I made two of my friends watch it for the first time, and they recorded their reactions. And so it's like just a let's watch it the holiday special, and you just slowly see them descend into madness throughout.
Oh my goodness, I love that.
It's so good. Anyway, Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
So there's been a really hearty discussion that I have not been able to fully keep up with in chat. But since that seems to be what's going on with chat, and I know it's a big point where I think to some level we might agree, even though the how much we weight it is different. But let's talk a little bit about Ben, especially because I haven't really done that on this channel on purpose because I've been terrified to do it. But like I have complex feelings because I went in kind of assuming he was going to die. My worry is as long as I just really wanted him to die a good guy if he was gonna die. And like if he had died evil, that probably would have been what killed the movie for me. But I see a lot of discussion about how even what's going on in the chat about like he had to die or whatever, and like what my personal read, and I think people will disagree with me on this for the reasons they will, is I don't see his death as punishment for his life as Kylo Ren, and I see it as a sacrifice that he made for Rey, which is why it doesn't bother me as much. I don't want him, like, not to say that if he had survived, that there shouldn't be some sort of consequences for being the supreme leader of the whole universe. But like, I'd never had a vindictive need for him to serve out that atonement. I wanted it more for him to complete his journey to being better. But the way I took it and what made me feel better about it was that it didn't feel like the movie was punishing him. But I think people disagree with me on that. There are people who do see it as the movie punishing him. And I just kind of I don't know, just as kind of like a lead into this discussion, how did you feel about like why he died in the film?
So I think the majority of the storytelling, and I've seen in my life, redemption tends to end in death.
Yeah.
And so should I probably have been as surprised as I was? No. Um, I mean, we've seen it plenty of times in Star Wars where someone was redeemed and they did die. I guess part of me, even though it was billed as the end of the Skywalker saga, because it was the rise of Skywalker,
Right.
and even though his last name is Solo, I think of him as a Skywalker because
Same.
he's got that lineage.
Yep.
It was really hard to think that it could be called the rise of Skywalker and then a Skywalker die.
Yep.
Because I never even saw Rey taking on
Yeah.
the Skywalker name,
I agree.
or I could see her taking on the legacy, but I didn't see anything about her actually taking on the name. So
Yeah, unless
with
by
that
marriage.
not in my view at all. Yeah, unless by marriage. So with that not in my view at all, I think I wasn't ready for it. I think I really like the way you phrase that because actually I never thought of it that way until now. So like I said, I didn't really read like comics or anything, and so I saw a lot of people I know on Twitter who said, okay, they're laying out this entire complicated
Right.
backstory of all the things he suffers through and all of his feelings, like leading up to like Ben Solo becoming Kylo Ren, and then how Kylo Ren operates in the sequel trilogy. That I absorbed all of that information
Yep.
and was like, well, yeah, the movie I felt like is punishing him. What
Yeah.
kind of hopefulness is that to go through all those things and just die? But But then thinking about like supplemental material, people who never read that,
Mhm.
I could see oh no, he gave his life for someone else, because the things that I think and know about Ben Solo, of course he's not going to let Rey just die. He
Right.
would rather. So I never thought about that. And see, here we go. Look at this.
And
Maybe. um, I was, and to be fair, I was
Mhm.
talking with my dad because I watched The Rise of Skywalker this morning, and I was talking with my dad about it,
Mhm.
and he said, Gina, maybe in 20 years you're going to revisit this film and
Mhm.
you're going to love it. And
Mhm.
I am not like, I must hate this movie
Right.
like my whole life. I could revisit it in 20 years and still love it.
Mhm.
But to be fair, I should
Mhm.
let everyone know that even if I think I soften towards that, I don't think I'll forgive this film for killing.
That's fair. I think there's a difference between I didn't like a movie, I didn't like the movie's choices, and I'm just never gonna like really warm up to it. And let me make my whole personality in my entire life hating this movie. Like those are just two. There's a lot
Yeah.
of space between those two things. There's a lot of validity
Um,
to one side versus the other there.
I think part of it, and this actually kind of came up with like our Twitter discussions
Mhm.
past, I think part of what also made his death so hard for me is
Mhm.
um seeing the Force Awakens TV spot saying, "Who is that person in the mask?"
Right.
Checking out all of the original trilogy and prequel trilogy DVDs so that I could say if he has any connection
Mhm.
to the people in like these films, I'll understand what it is. And
Mhm.
so I realized I was essentially watching these films like, yes, I fell in love with all of
Mhm.
these characters and I became invested in all these characters and all these storylines,
Mhm.
but my original intent and like my through line goal was to
Mhm.
say, what happens to this person?
Right.
And so to spend 4 years going, what happens? What happens? It has to be great.
Mhm.
And then in death, I was like, so maybe that was my priority a little bit too much.
Well, I think that's just kind of I see it too, with other characters like fans who kind of became fans through the Clone Wars, and then like their character is Ahsoka. They tend to see the Jedi radically different than how I see the Jedi because of what happens to Ahsoka. And it's completely valid to see it that way if that's like your entry character. So I kind of think like whatever the entry media and especially whatever the entry kind of character is for Star Wars does really shape your experience. And I personally think that's valid. It's just if you I think we would all get at each other's throats a lot less if we could understand why we like what we like and why we don't like what we don't like.
Right, right. And then I think the other thing is, so all the time on Unmistakably Star Wars,
Mhm.
one of the co-hosts, Bex, every single time we talked about like as we do speculation leading up, she'd be
Mhm.
like, and Kylo has to die, and Kylo has to die, and all these things. And
Yeah.
every time I'd be like, no,
We
he
know he
doesn't have to
doesn't.
die. He can be redeemed all these ways and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was always in joking. I mean,
Yep.
she really thought he needed to die, but it was
Right.
always in joking, always in good fun.
Mhm.
And then she was one of the very first people to message me after we all saw Tross opening night. She
Yeah.
was like, Gina, are you okay? I know you didn't want that. And I was like,
Yeah.
and see, nothing actually like malicious was there. So I think
Yeah.
that's the other thing. It's like, okay, we know that you're like partial to a character. It
Yep.
is okay.
We're gonna check
Um,
on you.
but
I
I
just
do agree.
yeah. I'll
Oh,
go.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say when Mandalorian was on, Django would always watch it before I had a chance to, and he would warn me if there was going to be like the episode where they. Well, I guess if you're from not a place, or like if you're just getting the Mandalorian now, mild spoiler. But there's one of the later episodes, one of the characters drops Baby Yoda, and he like texted me to be like, "Look, I'm just gonna warn you. There's gonna be a scene in this episode that's gonna bother you." And I'm like, "Okay."
Mm-hmm. I was
It's
like,
like,
I know who you are.
yep. It's like I'm not going to give you spoilers, but you need to be prepared because there's going to be a scene that upsets you.
Well, that's the other thing. So with most movies, I'm like, okay, give me a spoiler because I don't
Yeah.
like it when cringy stuff happens or like my
Right.
anxiety. But for big things like Star Wars that I'm super invested in, I'm like, okay, we're going dark. I don't want to know any spoilers.
Mhm.
And my friend Amy Wishman
Mhm.
like knew what was going to know what happens.
Yeah.
And she was like a few days before the movie, she was like, Gina, you can't text me or I'm going to tell you a spoiler that you don't want to know.
Yeah.
And so I see the movie. I call her
Yeah.
crying because I cried
Yeah.
afterwards.
Which is fair.
and she go and I go, was this the spoiler that you didn't want to tell me? And she was like, yeah. Are you glad that I didn't tell you? And I was like, actually, yeah, because if you had told me, I probably wouldn't have gone to see the movie, and I probably would have if I did, I would have been dreading it like
The
the
whole
whole entire
time.
time.
Yeah, which is fair.
Especially like that moment when Rey and Kylo are fighting like with the waves, and I was just like, "Is what's happening?" And so I was like, at least I got to enjoy like the grand majority of the
Of the movie
movie before.
until the end. No, and
Yeah.
I know Amy's been wrestling a lot with the movie since it came out too. She's been one of my favorite people to talk to online as well. But no, I think I mean I remember watching Tross for the first time, and when like I was all excited because they kissed, and then like he lays down, and I just remember screaming in the theater like, "Don't you do it! Don't you do it!" Because I knew it was about to happen. I was like, "Don't you do it! Don't you do it!" And then he did, and I was like, and then we get to the end, and then he wasn't a Force ghost, and I was like, what are you doing to me? And now
Oh my goodness.
I live with this headcanon that there's a very good reason why he's not a Force ghost that we will find out later, and I'm sure that's just a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I tell myself. But I mean, you're right. With Star Wars, that's a point a lot of people make. They'll either be like, in Star Wars with Redemption, there's death, and then they'll be like, yeah, but we literally only have Callus who gets to like run off with his space husband and live a happy life, and we don't have a lot of other explanations of it. And so there's this argument of, is it like poetry and it rhymes and you should do the same thing because this is what happens in Star Wars, or is it we're ready for something new? And I I really disagree with the notion that Ben could ever have gone back to the Resistance, at least not in the beginning, as long as Leia had passed. I think in
Mm-hmm.
a world where Carrie hadn't have passed and Leia could have survived to the end of that movie, and Leia was there, there's a way to write it where she could protect him. But without
Mm-hmm.
her, I just don't see how he goes back to the Resistance. But I think there was a way for him to. I kept using the word exile, and that made people mad. And I didn't really mean like him go off by himself, but I mean like I think there was a way he could go outside of Resistance for public space where they don't have jurisdiction. And oh, sorry, my phone. Um, I think there was a way to do that and have him find himself in a way that's not a war tribunal. But I
Mm-hmm.
also think that doing that would have just been complicated. Like if episode 9 was a Disney Plus series and they had time, I think we could have seen that. But because it was a film and they need to like I was saying to you before the stream, I feel like Ryan kind of like made a Star Wars movie for people who are already invested in Star Wars. And that doesn't mean you had to be a super fan to get it or like it, but like he made the movie for the people who have seen a lot of Star Wars and they were ready for something different. JJ made a movie for the people who only watch Star Wars on TNT or whatever the TV station is in your country, and like they kind of remember the name of Tatooine maybe, and like they know who Luke Skywalker is, and then there's the new three people like they don't really he made a movie that every level of fan could appreciate what was going on. And you can love that or hate that. You can prefer one or the other. But at the end of the day, I think JJ kind of made a movie to try to get it as many people to enjoy it as possible. And I've kind of seen that take, but in a negative slant. That like, well, he just wanted to appease everybody and make no one happy. And I'm like, no, I think he wanted to try to make as many people happy as possible. Um,
Yeah.
and that led to some decisions that really upset others.
Yeah. To be fair, I personally think that redemption arcs that don't end in death are
Mm-hmm.
super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there are plenty of stories where someone dies, and I'm like, okay, well, that made sense for the character, that made sense for the story. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
want it to be like in a total, completely like absolute thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I've seen it floating around Twitter and things whether or not he could come back to the Resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought about Carrie Fisher or Leia being like one of the buffers that
Mm-hmm.
makes it okay. So I really like that you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
And I do agree. I do
Oh,
would uh
hold on. Sorry,
need
my internet just took a hit. Say that again.
oh, okay. Well, I was just gonna say that Carrie Fisher or Leia being a buffer,
Mm-hmm.
I think is important. At least in the beginning.
Mhm.
think eventually maybe people will come around,
Mhm.
I think. Uh and so I get why, like, if someone didn't know the context, why they wouldn't like the word exile, but
Mhm.
I think it's fine. I get, like, going off in the galaxy,
Yeah.
doing things, some way of whatever you think atoning is, because
Yep.
obviously he has done things and he was
Yep.
the supreme leader, and then maybe eventually coming back. Because I think that's, a discussion I think maybe you guys have had or other people
Mhm.
have had, with Vader,
Yeah.
whether Leia actually forgave Vader or was Luke's forgiveness enough and how the galaxy felt. And
Mhm.
that's an example where I'm thinking it makes sense that Anakin died
Yeah.
after all of that. And I don't hate Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
um and so actually so I'm gonna agree with you on that one. If he
Mhm.
had lived, I could see exile being an option.
Yeah.
Mm,
I think that would have been, and I think that would have been interesting. And I wanted that just because I wanted something different.
mhm.
And even though I knew the movies were ending, I wanted more time with the characters, and I knew there was time to make things complicated, but make sense, with a book series or something after the movies. And so I was kind of holding out hope, but
But I also think not even just from a the resistance
mhm.
or a trio's point of view, but I think that also makes sense for Ben's point of view.
Yeah.
Because here you have someone who's always heard like Palpatine's voice in his head, thinking
Yep.
it was different people and whatnot,
Mhm.
who's had this, I guess, sort of estrangement from his parents and who's
Mhm.
had these issues with Luke. He probably needs to take a quick 2.5
Yeah.
seconds to figure out who he is and what he wants.
Right? It's like the Star Wars equivalent of backpacking through Europe, right? Like, like he's a millennial. He needs some time to like go work out his feelings on a walk.
I need someone to write that fan fiction now. Modern AU.
Ben goes backpacking through Europe to feel better about all the things he's done.
I would read that in a heartbeat. But yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. It's the same way. I would like to see more of it. I think
Hmm.
we saw like a small good amount, but you have to see Ray coming to terms with,
Yep.
who she is in this insane responsibility and awesome power that she has.
Yep.
Well, I mean, here's someone who also has insane power and awesome responsibility.
Hmm.
It makes sense. And then as a dyad,
Yep.
maybe just do a forced FaceTime call, do it together, or go meet him wherever. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Well, and that was the other issue people had with that idea is it got in the way. They saw it as it getting in the way of Ray and Ben being together, and I'm like, when you can literally just like open up a force window and be like, hey, what's up? Like they were not going to be separated just because he was off somewhere.
Yep.
Um, so I never saw it that way either. And I think there's room too, like depending on how Ray sets up the Jedi. If the Jedi are like a separate but sovereign kind of space away from the Republic, maybe he could have stayed there like it's an embassy kind of a thing.
Hmm.
But again, the more I think about it, the more I realize that would have been radically complicated to explain in a movie that was already doing 9 gazillion other things.
Yeah. So this may be kind of a controversial take.
Okay,
So
I'm
I
ready.
apologize to everyone, but it's my take. I
Hmm.
actually feel like the original trilogy trio shouldn't have been in the sequel trilogy as much.
That's fair.
Only like I love them. I'm
Yep.
glad we got to check in on them.
Yep.
But I feel like once you introduce Luke, Han, and Leia, it becomes about Luke, Han, and Leia,
Yep.
and you have to spend a significant portion of the story saying who they've become,
Yep.
why they've become this way. And
Mhm.
when you spend that much amount of time dedicated to that, you get
Mhm.
less amount of time establishing backstory
Mhm.
and deciding who the characters are going to be. So I almost wish there had been like a mini in the middle movie, so
Mhm.
like
Yeah. Right.
they could show up, but you had your answers to how they got to being this way.
Right.
Um, and so I want all these stories that you can't explain in the 2 hours and 22 minutes that was The Rise of Skywalker.
Yep.
But that also, and I too have the headcanon that wasn't a force ghost somewhere out there.
Somewhere
I just
there's a thing.
I would just hate for like so personally, I just be like, more Ben, let's go.
Yeah.
But for whoever becomes invested in the next book or movie, I could see like
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you introduce Ben and Ray, it's like, well, are we going to learn about the new people? And so that's the only part where I'd be like, okay, let's let it lay down because I don't necessarily like how it turned out with the sequel trilogy. I
Mm-hmm.
would hate to do that to someone else's next
Right.
trilogy or books or comics. But as someone who wants more Ben and Ray, they should do it.
I completely understand. I always make the joke that everything in Star Wars is secretly about Yoda, and it all comes back to Yoda somehow. And I can connect anything back to Yoda. And I've said that to we were interviewing Kevin Scott on here last year, and he said when writing Yoda he has to be careful because once Yoda shows up, it is about Yoda because Yoda is this iconic character who's been around for so long and means so much to people that he says that there's stories he's written where like it makes sense for Yoda to be there, but you have to be so careful that
Mm-hmm.
that Yoda doesn't overshadow the characters. And I think that's kind of what you're saying with the legacy characters that we got in the sequel trilogy. And I certainly understand that point. I think, am I remembering correctly? I think Michael Arndt's script before JJ rewrote it or brought Larry Kasdan on, I think it had less of the legacy characters. I can't remember now. It's been so long. But
I don't know.
I think it
That
was
would
a
be very, very interesting.
I think JJ when he rewrote Force Awakens added more setup for Han, Luke, and Leia, which would be a very JJ thing to do, love it or hate it. Um, but I mean, I certainly get it. I love the new characters so much that I don't think I would have been upset that there was less involvement from the legacy characters if that's what we got. Um, I also really like what we got, so I'm not complaining either.
That's true. I
But like,
as much as you could hear me complain about the rise, I do like the trilogy that we got.
yeah, yep. And so I think there's I like to say that there are many, many, many good Star Wars movies out there that we won't get, right? Like Force Awakens is a
Mm-hmm.
great movie, but there's 2, 3 dozen good episode sevens that we could have gotten. And this was the episode 7 we got. And there's any number of eights we could have gotten, any number of nines. And I I think that's another kind of important thing to remember is a story can be not what you would have preferred, but it can also be okay or good. Or you still don't have to like it. Like I'm not saying it's inherently going to be good, but like there's such a thing as more than one good way to tell what we got. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Not to move too quickly
Oh,
off of Ben, but
you're
I
fine.
see you talk about it often. I
Yeah.
think the other point of issue in The Rise of Skywalker
Mm-hmm.
was Rey being a Palpatine.
Yep.
Um, when I was in the theater
Yeah.
and that was revealed, I
Yep.
was like, I'm sorry, what? Except there was more explicit. I was like,
Yeah.
what just happened? But I have to admit that actually didn't bother me. And I think that comes from the fact that my original headcanon was that she was Kenobi.
Mm-hmm.
So in my head, I was already connecting her to a
So,
name that we
yep.
already knew, one that was already powerful. I wouldn't have mind if it had just ended with Ray Nobody.
Yep.
I think both are equally powerful. I
Yep.
didn't at first like adopting the last name of Skywalker,
Skywalker.
but then we talked and I was like, no,
Sorry.
actually, um,
I've been a little Ray obsessed these last couple of months.
which is why I wanted to like get into it with
Yeah.
you here. Not get into it antagonistically,
No, I
but
know what you
yeah.
mean. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I yeah, I was actually really okay with that. To me, it spoke to these ideas of found, which I think
Yeah.
the sequel, well, all of Star Wars is, but I think especially the sequel trilogy is just
Mm-hmm.
full of themes that connect to found family.
Yeah.
And I liked the idea of this idea of deciding who you want to be and blood not having, but also being important if you want it to be and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. So then I was Ray Palpatine, Ray Skywalker. I
Yeah.
like that.
When we hit that point in the theater, what happened when I was watching it is I had this feeling for a while because I did a before Last Jedi, so we before the whole everything was settled for 2 years. Oh, hold on, I'll prove that for you, Ian. There you go. Before that, I just did like a possible Rey identities video, and so it was like Rey nobody was on there. I came out of Force Awakens thinking she was going to be a Skywalker, which I did not leave Last Jedi feeling that way, but I left Force Awakens feeling that way. And I needed more because I couldn't just have two things. So I just I put Rey Kenobi on there, and then I did Rey Palpatine just to round it out. Totally like not buying it at all. And then as I was collecting, like breaking it down, I was like, you know, this. I mean, maybe. And then we got Last Jedi, and it seemed like she was a nobody, and I was like, okay, fine. I'm like, that's just gonna be my crackpot theory. It's totally not plausible, but it'd be hilarious if they did it. And then all of the stuff with Palpatine kept coming back, and then I just remember thinking that like maybe they'll tie it back where she's like an experiment of Palpatine because of her connection to Jakku and his connection to Jakku. And then you get literally the opening scene of The Rise of Skywalker where Palpatine's like, she's not who you think she is. I literally sat there and went, they're not going to do it, are they? Like, they're not going to. And then you get to the reveal scene and I was like, holy frick, they just did it. And in my head, I don't even know if I could enjoy it or not enjoy the moment. My brain was just like, oh, the crap's gonna hit the fan. Like, that was just what was going through my brain, was like, it's gonna be a war zone after this movie. Was like the only thing going through my head. But I since described it that that whole scene was surreal because I had said on other videos the reason why I wanted Rey to be a Skywalker is I liked the idea of the son of the daughter of Vader and the daughter of the son of Vader having this thematic parallel, and I thought that would be awesome. But her being a nobody was cool too. And then I'm sitting there and you get the reveal, and then all of a sudden Kylo's going, my mother is the daughter and your father was, and I'm just like, this isn't happening. This movie isn't real. I'm dreaming. It's December 18. This is ridiculous.
Oh my goodness, they owe you a writer's credit.
It turns out JJ and I share one brain cell, and that's, I really would like to apologize to the world. The Rise of Skywalker is my fault. And you can direct all your hate mail to me, leave Matt Martin alone, and everything's gonna be fine.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I can't believe how validating that must be. That makes me want to speculate more before movies, just so I could be like, yes.
It was like, I am always wrong. Like, that's what got me. Like, if you go to, like, what I thought Force Awakens was gonna be about, if you go to what I thought Last Jedi, I was wrong. I'm like, I'm just used to being wrong. And then I'm sitting there in Rise of Skywalker like, what the
heck? They're like, we have one more Skywalker movie to make. Let's go.
It's going. And it was just really funny. And I fully admit that a lot of my bias for liking it is somehow JJ went to 2015. I described it as JJ did exactly what I wanted in 2015, but found a way to make it where they could still kiss. So I was really happy.
Yes. I think when people start looking at it critically, because I know plenty of people who don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't have the exact dialogue and lines down, but I think there's a moment Kylo's like, your power comes from him, or something like that, in reference to Palpatine.
Oh, the line, I've seen people yell about it online so many times. It's like, the line is, you have his power. It's something, and you have his power, yeah.
And I can see how people could make that connection. I'm not yelling at or faulting at anyone who makes that connection. But I personally, which is why I guess I don't mind her like being a Palpatine, never saw that as like you're strong because of a man, which I think is the general argument. It's like, oh, she's this strong, she knows all of this, she can do all this because she's a Palpatine. And I always saw it as like, she's strong and she's a Palpatine.
Yep.
So I think that's why that didn't bother me.
And I think this is where I tend to get myself into trouble as a super Kylo fan. And like, I don't say it to be braggy. I'm like, please believe me with my Kylo blanket and my Kylo shrine here that I'm not dissing on anybody. Like, please understand this is a good faith argument. But to me, there's a difference between Kylo Ren and Ben Solo, even though they're the same person. And like, if Kylo is telling Rey something, you should take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But if it's Ben, that's different. So like,
Yeah.
and I think you even see that in The Last Jedi. People comment on how the hand touch scene, he's not wearing his glove. When he offers for her to take his hand after the throne room, he's wearing a glove. Like, the point is there's like a vulnerable side and a not. And like in that scene, again, they make a point of showing you his hand and he has a glove on. Like, that visual that language, the visual language is still there. And Kylo Ren is obsessed with lineage, obsessed with dark power from lineage, and he has said, people make fun of it. In the movie, he's just like, I'm gonna find you and turn you to the dark side because this is how people talk, and like, we know that's what he's trying to do. So he's hoping, like, Rey, your grandfather is Palpatine, so let's be a dyad together. Like, that's effectively what the scene is. And she's like, what the, why would I agree to this? What's wrong with you? I'm gonna yeet onto the Falcon. And it's like, like, that's basically how that discussion goes. And but that's because that's what Kylo is into. So like, that line of, you don't just have power, you have his power, is really because that's how Kylo would see it. And I don't know that Ben would see it that way, or that Rey should see it that way. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, yeah. If you hear like me discussions like now or on Twitter, I'll use Kylo and Ben interchangeably because I mean the character that Adam Driver plays. But I do think that there is a distinction. Probably in 2015 when I first watched The Force Awakens, I definitely wasn't thinking there was a distinction. But
Right.
after The Last Jedi, I was like, okay, I can because so coming into it, actually I don't know if this is because I came into it so late, but I don't see Darth Vader and Anakin as the same people, like, at all. In fact, I really, really liked Anakin, and I was like, why do all of you like Darth Vader? That might be a controversial opinion. I was like, guys, because everyone would be like, he's the big bad guy. He's one of the like top, like best villains in the world. And I was always like, he's the Emperor's like lapdog. What are you all talking about? It's Palpatine is the really scary guy.
Throwing some
Vader.
shade.
And then the end of Rogue One came, and then I was like, oh, this is why you guys think Vader is scary. So I saw them as two different people. And I definitely didn't see Kylo and Ben that way until after The Last Jedi. And then I was like, okay, I can get on board with this. And then especially like if I didn't already believe it then, it was hammered home during The Rise of Skywalker when she said, I did want to take your hand, Ben's hand. And I was
hand.
like,
Oh, that line. Oh my gosh.
Like, it made me tear up. I was like, yes.
That line in the theater was everything.
I was like, he needs to understand. It's finally happening. And so
the look on his face when he's like, oh.
He's like, oh, this is all that I needed to do.
Okay.
And I loved that multiple people afterwards, some of my friends, they were texting me and they were like, Gina, I get it. I love Ben Solo. I finally understood. And I was like, oh my goodness. So for them, it took The Rise of Skywalker to see Ben Solo.
Right.
Where, I mean, this may be terrible to say, but I feel like we all like villains. I do like Kylo Ren.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I really, really love Ben Solo. And so, but I saw crap of Ben Solo throughout The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And just for some people, they didn't see him until The Rise of Skywalker. And they were like, Gina, I finally get obsessed. And I was like, you know what? Who cares? Welcome to the club.
It's all good. Usually with like Anakin and Vader, Kylo and Ben, I use the name depending on like when we're talking about. So like, I refer to Kylo as Kylo for like everything up until his redemption scene, or like Ben if it's the comic or something like that. But that's usually, and I'm always worried I'm gonna upset people because I'm like calling him Kylo and they're gonna be like, but he was redeemed. I'm like, I know, but I'm talking about The Force Awakens.
But he was redeemed. I loved it. Well, to be fair, to upset people, I call him Kyle all the time. We call him Kyle Ron. So I don't even always use the right name in the first place. But yeah, I definitely see a difference. Oh my goodness, I love that.
That's what everyone sounds like on Twitter. It's like, but the thing that happened, that's how I read every tweet. I'm just like, okay.
That's the new voice that I'm gonna read every tweet.
Read it.
That's exactly what it is.
It's like, oh, okay.
I think this is actually something I'm super, super into hearing from you.
Okay.
I once again haven't actually read the supplemental material. I don't
Okay.
expect that you have, but
Mhm.
maybe heard things. So, I read somewhere on Twitter that Ray's favorite color is
Mhm.
green because it's lush and all these things, and it's
Mhm.
not. And I'm assuming
I
hates
think it
Jakku and things.
comes from the novelization. I haven't gotten to that part of the novelization, but I think that's
Well,
where it's come from.
minor spoilers. Sorry,
No,
guys. Ray has a favorite color.
that's
um,
ruined for me now.
this is what ruins Star Wars.
Dang it.
um and all these things, and so I know that there's been debate on the fact that she ends on
On Tatooine.
Tatooine. And I know that there's the argument that it's about the storytelling. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter that she doesn't necessarily stay there. It's the
Mhm.
fact that that's where it ends, um and how she feels about the desert. And
Mhm.
so in general,
Yep.
and so I guess I should preface this by saying I am looking at this movie through two different lenses.
Yep.
I look through what the actual story wants to convey and do,
Mhm.
and then because I've looked at interviews with the creators, I'm also looking like through an outside world lens of what
Mhm.
it took to make this and the authors were thinking,
Yep.
because I think author intent does matter.
Mhm.
And so, like, from an outside perspective,
Mhm.
I get it. You have the end of the Skywalker saga. It
Mhm.
did start with A New Hope,
Yep.
even if you have the Phantom Menace, like,
Mhm.
chronologically.
Mhm.
And so I see the idea of returning there and having the close in the circle. I don't think she stayed on Tatooine. I
Right.
understand the idea that story wise, that might not be the best, but it's one of the things I'm willing to be like, that's not the hill I'm gonna die on,
Right.
but if you wanna die on, that's cool.
Yep.
Um, but the one thing I guess that I didn't really settle with me, yes,
Mhm.
Tatooine exists in the Phantom Menace and things,
Yep.
but when you were closing the circle, I was like, cool, Luke, Leia show up. Not
Mhm.
mad about that.
Mhm.
It's Anakin, Shmi, and Padme.
Right. 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 Right.
Not that, Shmi and Padme are ghosts, but
Right.
like, so I was just curious about your thoughts about ending desert
Right.
prequels.
I I'm a huge prequel fan, and I am always disappointed in the lack of acknowledgement of the prequels. And there's different things, like Simon Pegg has been known to really hate the prequels, and he's in Star Wars, and there's all these kind of things that go on. So I would have loved for just more references in Rise of Skywalker to reference the prequels in general. One of the things about the movie that I think is really dumb is when they're showing you like the galaxy rising up against the First Order, and they show you Bespin and Jakku and Endor. It almost feels like they forgot and left 3 shots in the movie because it's just like not long enough. I'm like, why these 3 planets? This is really random. So like, I would have loved a couple of shots from like some prequel planets, just to make it
Yeah.
really feel like a bigger thing, and not like, this is the stock footage that was just on the Lucasfilm server. Let's just add it and see what happens. So like, that's one thing where I'm watching it where I'm like, I literally forget these 3 shots are in here because they're just so, I don't even know why they're here. Um, so I think like that would have been a better place maybe to make some references. But like, I feel like the reason why I don't die on that hill is I have just been disappointed since 2005 at how little anybody will reference the prequels. I just don't even care anymore. Like, I'm so numb to the pain of the forgotten prequels that I just don't even see it. I'm like, it was never gonna happen. Like, I'm that cynical about it.
No.
So
Oh
I'm
my
like, of
goodness.
course they ended on Tatooine. They were like, well, and like maybe that's terrible, and maybe I shouldn't give the movie a pass for that. But I'm just like, I don't know, man. I try to buy good prequel shirts from anywhere other than like maybe 2 stores, and I can never find anything because no one cares. And so I'm just like, you can't buy any, and you can buy a lot of sequel trilogy stuff and a lot of OT stuff. But like, where's my Mace Windu shirt? I can't buy any. So, um,
Yeah.
but about like, or like, find me like a Yoda shirt that isn't a meme. Like, that's my thing. Is I don't
Hmm.
own like any Yoda shirts because they're all like, look, it's Stoner Yoda. It's so funny. I'm like, don't want a Stoner Yoda shirt. Who's obviously an OT character too, but he's also in the prequels. Um, But like, as far as ending on Tatooine, this is kind of like out of context, but I find it really funny how many people are suddenly really upset that A New Hope is considered the beginning, when I've been arguing that people should watch the films in chronological order for a long time, and everyone always tells me no, release order. So I'm like, oh, now magically it all starts with Phantom Menace, apparently, after I've been arguing to watch them chronologically for years. So like, there's a little bit of a pride thing in it for me. I'm like, oh, now, like, I feel like Cassie, and I'm like, I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. Um, but I don't know. The way I kind of view it is Rey knows galactic history largely from Luke's journals. And
Mm-hmm.
probably general understanding too, but she didn't go to school. She grew up in the desert. So like, she's self-taught as it is. And if I were her, I wouldn't be reading history books on Jakku. So,
Yeah.
she probably has learned history through Luke's journals, which means she only has the understanding of the prequel trilogy that Luke would have, which is all secondhand anyway. So to
Mm-hmm.
me, her going to bury those sabers is probably not even about Anakin, to be honest. It's probably just about Luke and Leia, because those are the legacy people that she knows. And maybe you can make the argument Anakin hates sand. He wouldn't want his saber buried in the sand, and Luke hated it, and Leia was only ever there as a slave girl, and like, I get all of that, and all of that's valid. But if you're Rey and you only know the universe through a guy's journals, and you don't know where the appropriate place is to bury the sabers, you might go Tatooine, and just because it's that simple. And because I don't think she stays there, I don't think it's a problem that there's sand. Like, I think she would want to live somewhere that's green, but I don't think she'd be like, I'm never going in a desert again. I refuse. You know, like,
Yeah.
I get covered in snow every year, and it's annoying, but I'm not like, I refuse. This is it. I've known snow my whole childhood, and it ends. I'm ending my relationship with snow. Like,
No, no, I think that definitely makes sense. And I think that it probably sounds a little mean when I've said it before, because I
yeah.
think there's this dual thing that exists where, yes, movies, especially Star Wars, can be, probably is a commentary on real life situations, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, it's also fake and it's in space. So, like, how I'm feeling about X, Y, and Z
Yep.
is like what I'm projecting onto it.
Yep.
Does Ray actually care?
Right.
Probably not. So I really appreciate you like bringing up like she knows him from his journals. This
Mm-hmm.
is about it. It would so in that context, it absolutely makes sense.
Yep.
Now, granted, does it also have another meaning for us as an audience who
Yes.
has a good chance of starting with A New Hope?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Could you
Mm-hmm.
be mad at that reason? Yeah, you can be mad at anything you want, but
Yep.
also it makes sense for Ray.
Yep. And I would agree with that. I think. Uh. Oh crap! I lost my train of thought. You were saying something, and it made me think of another thing. In the oh well. I mean, I guess it'll come back to me. But I mean, to go to that scene also. I know a lot of people were even upset with the idea of, does she, like, because she sleds at the end down the thing, and that upset a lot of
Mhm.
people. And to me, the sledding wasn't a sign of her oppression. It was a way she found something good in a really bad
Mhm.
situation she was in. And I just think about how, like, I went to Galaxy's Edge, and how moved I was by that. And like, I made my hilt because it was the colors of Mace Windu's hilt, and I picked my blade because it was the color of Yoda's blade, and these were like my two favorite Jedi growing up. And I made a lightsaber to honor them. And like, people are like, but I don't feel like I regressed as a person because I did that. And people
Mhm.
are mad about a CGI hood that's not CGI, and I'm like, I'm wearing a Rey shirt. Like, how many of us wear Star Wars shirts because we like people and we want to honor them? And then this idea,
Mhm.
well, like, Rey has this and Rey has it. And I'm like, yeah, but Kylo's whole getup is to look like Vader.
Yeah.
Like, so many Star Wars characters look the way they looked to look like people who came before. Like, Snoke was obsessed with Sith lore and kept stuff around. I mean, obviously we know why now, But like even
Mm-hmm.
Palpatine was all about adornment, and you look in his office and he has all this really weird artwork where you wonder why no one ever figured it out, because he literally has a painting of a Sith War in his office. I'm sure he's a good guy, guys. Like, I'm sure it's fine. And you know, you see that in Star Wars where people wear things to honor. I mean, people are mad about that, but like we have Clone Wars coming out, and the clones are like wearing a helmet with Ahsoka's face on
So, mm-hmm.
it. Like, how is that? How is it different?
Well, one of the things that I was thinking of was, so not only are we going to maybe not as many callbacks to the
Mm-hmm.
prequel trilogy or
Right.
the original trilogy, but the fact that it's the end of all these 9 films, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also the end of this saga. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think about when Ben was talking with Han,
Mm-hmm.
and they essentially just redid the whole scene from The Force Awakens.
Yep.
And so I saw the arguments for this idea of regression,
Mm-hmm.
and I completely understood where they were coming from.
Yep.
But I was just like, look at this callback to like 4 years ago when we all first started watching these Disney movies.
Yeah. It's like.
They happened. And so that's why I'm mad about sledding. Also, this idea that when you're sledding in the beginning, you're
Mm-hmm.
scavenging, you're
Yep.
hungry, you're sad. When she sleds at the end, she's happy. She's been through things. Maybe content, if happy is not the right
Yeah.
word. However you want to argue about her losing
she's
people in her
she's
life.
right. She's centered, at least.
Mm-hmm.
She's functional. She's willing to look for joy in the world, even if she lost a big part of it for her up until that point, that sort of thing.
Which I think is a hopeful message,
Mm-hmm.
because if you want to go back to applying it to life, I mean,
Yep.
apply it to now. A bunch of things are happening.
Yeah.
It's fun to look for joy in small things.
It is. Well, and I guess to be a little bit nicer about the point I was making about the hood and stuff, I think when you like what a movie is doing, you will forgive a lot, and when you don't like what a movie is doing, you won't forgive those same things. And I was thinking about this because I was recently rewatching The Mandalorian with my mom, and those first 3, I was thinking about those first 3 episodes, and in the beginning, Mando gets the fob or whatever to go after Baby Yoda. He doesn't know anything. It's super secretive, and the client is making this big deal about like bring him back alive if you can, but like, you know, it's okay if you have to kill it or whatever. And it's this big thing. And then you come back at the end of the 3rd episode, or in the 3rd episode, and everybody has a fob. And he's like, "How many did you give out?" And he's like, "Oh, like the whole town." And I'm like, I sit there and think, like, it's a little weird how cloak and dagger this was in the 1st episode, and then at the end, it's literally everyone. But then I let it go because, but it's fun and I don't care and I'm enjoying it. I'm just not gonna. Maybe he was just being cloak and dagger because he likes cloak and dagger, or maybe didn't get the orders to kill it because the scientist was in the room and he told the
Mm-hmm.
scientist was in the room for everybody else. Like, I can headcanon ways that it works, but like I'm
Mm-hmm.
willing to do that headcanon work. But if I didn't like The Mandalorian, I wouldn't have a soul, and also I wouldn't be willing to forgive as much. I wouldn't be willing to do that work because the movie
Mm-hmm.
didn't, or the show didn't like win me over first. And I think that's what happened with Rise of Skywalker. I think that's what happened with The Last Jedi. Like, obviously, there's the hate group that hates The Last Jedi for
Mm-hmm.
because they hate people of color, they hate women, they hate whatever. But I mean, like, the people who just didn't like The Last Jedi because they just didn't like The Last Jedi, and they're mad that bombs fell in
Mm-hmm.
space or whatever. It's the same thing with Rise of Skywalker, where you just didn't like what the movie was doing, and you're not willing to do the mental work to be okay with things. And
Mm-hmm.
even then, I think that's fine. And I think we all need to kind of understand that in each other, that this movie just didn't work. You know, I've said before with Endgame, like, I haven't sworn off Marvel. I don't refuse to ever watch something Marvel again. I'm still gonna watch all the Disney Plus shows. I might brave Endgame again someday if I'm doing a rewatch. But like, you know, I didn't like it for like, at the end of the day, I just don't like time travel movies. So that movie was never gonna be like a thing for me. Like, and
Right.
that's not because the Russo brothers suck. It's just because I don't like time travel movies. And and I can just understand that and go, this wasn't for
Mm-hmm.
me. And I think that's kind of where people need to come to terms with too.
I think, to be fair, I
Mhm.
think the sequel trilogy had an impossible expectation.
Yeah.
So not that anything had not that ignorance is a like an excuse or anything.
Right.
So I don't want to just say, oh, something was a product of its time. I
Mhm.
think each of the trilogies was progressive
Mhm.
in its own way.
Yeah.
Um, but I think there's the argument that the sequel trilogy is the most diverse in terms of women,
Mhm.
men, how people look and things like that.
Yep.
And so I think that having a female protagonist like Ray,
Mhm.
with and I don't at all want to get into a
Yeah.
discussion that's terrible. But with having not terrible, just not the time for that.
No, I understand. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But with so many people having so many ideas on what's correct feminism,
Right.
how a woman should be displayed,
Mhm.
because Ray's the first how she is, not discounting Leia,
Right,
not
right, right.
discounting Padme, but Ray's the first how she is. I
Mhm.
think you were always gonna run into the issue of her ending and whether it was good enough as the first woman the way she is. And so I see those critical arguments and
Yep.
things, and I think, okay, that makes sense. If we had more stories like Ray's story,
Yep.
I feel like those arguments would kind of fall away a little because we'd have variety in different lives that women led.
Mhm.
But we don't. We have Ray. We
Yep.
love Ray.
Yep.
But I think that also probably just because the first.
Oh, I couldn't agree more because you were never going to satisfy women who feel seen by characters who are strong on their own, and you were and also satisfy people or women who feel seen by somebody who can have a family. And oh, that reminds me of the other point I was going to bring up, but that's okay. It's not important right now. Have a family and be strong in that too. And I kind of compare it to how people responded to Wonder Woman versus Captain Marvel, right? Because Wonder
Mm-hmm.
Woman had a love of her life, and that was a big part of her character. And Captain Marvel does not have a romance storyline. Some people argue you could read her friendship uh, with her best friend one way or another, but it's either way, it's not overt in film. And the problem isn't really that it's like Captain Marvel did it right or Wonder Woman did it right. The problem is that we have Captain Marvel and Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's right. And so like
It.
that's what people mean by having more representation is because nobody from any group, be it women or men, or any kind of persuasion, is monolithic. And Ray was never going to be everything to everybody. And I think that's important to remember. And the thing I was going to bring up, which is related to this point, was Pisana, the scene that
Mm-hmm.
I read completely different from people. I'm really kind of curious. And I guess it's not an invalid read, but I was just really surprised. Ray looks over at the kids at the festival in
Mm-hmm.
Pisana. And to me, I read that as these kids have the childhood I always wanted. They have a family, they're not alone. Like, that's Ray saying, oh, I wish I could have had that, when she's also like having to answer that she doesn't have a family name, and it's Ray being sad that she's not a part of a family. And then other people read
Mm-hmm.
it as Ray seeing kids and thinking, man, I really want children.
Yeah.
And I'm trying really hard not to say that condescendingly because I want to respect everyone's viewpoint, but that just didn't I it did not occur to me until I saw someone else give that take. And I'm kind of curious on your read on that scene.
It also did not occur to me, which is
Mhm.
wild because I am someone who's like, in the most general sense, women can have it all, wants a family one day.
Mhm.
And so you'd think that's how I would read it. And
Yeah.
I did not. I
Mhm.
just saw it as, look at all these people who feel loved as children. I
Yep.
did not. If I'm being honest, when I rewatched it this morning, because
Mhm.
I was emotional the other times I watched it in the theater, for good and bad reasons. Um, I watched it and I was like, that kind of feels shoehorned in. Um,
That's fair. I mean, that's fair.
because I remember one of the times I watched it, because I saw it 3 times in the theaters. One of the
Yeah.
times I watched it, I was thinking, they put that there for a reason. She's related to somebody, and they want to set that up, and it's not
Yep.
the most organic way to set that up, but that's okay. We have to know.
Yep.
um, and also it lends itself to the end of the film when she says Ray Skywalker.
Yep.
And so no, yeah, I just read that as once I got over the fact that I was like, awkward, but okay. I was just like, oh, look at
That's
her
fair.
seeing the childhood she never had. So no, I
Yeah.
never saw it as her like I'm gonna have kids one day.
I think, and part of that could just be my own bias, because like I'm not against the idea of having kids one day, but when I was Ray's age, so like 21, and I think that's the thing
Yeah.
a lot of people forget about Ray is that she's she's getting her life started. Um,
Yeah.
I definitely wasn't like, oh, when I have kids someday, but that's just me, and that's how I've been, and I think I think you were talking about it before, what you bring to and what you kind of put onto characters. I don't usually put that onto characters because
Mhm.
that's not a thing I actively think about in my life. But I could see if you are someone who is even at an early age thinking, "Oh, I want a family. I know I want kids someday." Because some women and men feel that way, and it's completely valid.
Mhm.
Like I could see you reading that scene that way. I think that's just like
Mhm.
it's such a different perspective that I
Mhm.
didn't fully understand.
I think the other thing that comes into reading that scene is
Mhm.
if you ship Ray with someone.
Yep.
So granted, you can ship anyone with anyone,
Yep.
ships, like the rare pairs and all that.
Mhm.
But and so I don't want to say anyone's ship is like invalid,
Right.
but the story and the writing does lend itself to more popular ships. So obviously you have people who ship Finn and Ray and people who ship Ray and Ben.
Right.
And so I think especially if you think I don't know if it's been debunked, but people are
Mhm.
allowed to interpret how they want
Yeah.
people. So I saw Finn as trying to tell Ray that he was force sensitive, and I know
That.
some
Yep.
people just really like to believe that he was trying to tell her that he liked her.
Yep.
So if you want to interpret the movie that way, you could think, oh well, I like Ray and Finn. Yeah,
Mhm.
she's thinking about kids. There's a pairing that could happen, like
Mhm.
legitimately happen in the film. Or
Yep.
yeah, I like Ray and Ben. They kissed. It's canon that
Yep.
pair's happening. They could have, except he's dead, but
Hey,
they could have.
I told you Luke
Maybe the
dated
voice goes.
a woman who possessed the body of his dead student in Legend, so like anything's possible.
It's possible. So I think also, so I'm not against any of those pairs. I
Yep.
all of them. I
Mhm.
don't necessarily. I'm not like. I don't really say that I ship Raylo, even though I
Mhm.
do. Not, I
Mhm.
guess, not ashamed, but it's like, oh, I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
Um, but when I was watching that movie, I wasn't thinking of her romantically with anyone,
Right.
and because I wasn't thinking of her romantically with anyone, I wasn't thinking about her having kids with
Kids. Yeah.
anyone. And so I think also part of it comes in how you view romance and families and
Yep.
if you already had her with someone. And so I
Yep.
think that because I didn't, I was just like,
I can.
so I saw that view on Twitter and oh,
What?
I didn't know we were thinking that. Okay.
And it was just, and again, like it's valid if you read it that way. I just think that that's a very specific read, like you said, and that doesn't make it more or less correct.
Hmm.
With Finn, I also assumed that it was him telling Ray that he was force sensitive. That is one of my gripes with the film. Of like, it's literally mentioned like 3 times and then never paid off, which I think is weird. Now, I
Hmm.
also disagree with the people who tell me that the movie does not explicitly say Finn is force sensitive. I'm like, did you miss the part where he like doubled over when Ray died? Because I didn't. I didn't miss that part, but okay.
Mm-mm.
Um,
There, there are so many times when he's like, "It's there, I know," blah blah blah. I'm just like, always. The one thing I thought was weird was he couldn't tell Poe. I felt like the
yeah,
relationship we got in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi
yeah, I would agree with
was
that.
he I felt like even if Poe didn't understand because he wasn't force sensitive, which
Yeah,
I guess that's also people think Poe's force sensitive. I think that's
I mean,
dope. Um
I have the Poe Dameron Jedi Warrior knockoff shirt. I totally bought that when I found it.
but I just thought it was so that tension, I was just
Yeah,
like, is this just because we need tension right now? I feel like
yeah,
we
I
have a
would
lot of
agree with
tension.
that
I did
too.
think that was an odd dynamic.
Because there was no
Did
point in this in the trilogy that established Poe as being like anti Force.
Mhm.
Like he even saw Luke Skywalker do Force stuff in the Last Jedi. So I would like that was kind of weird too, where he was I don't know if he was just self conscious about it. And then there's a part where it's like, "You're not Leia," and I'm like, "Where is this argument coming from? I don't know why we're having this
That
argument."
That whole argument, when I watched it today, I was just like, "Are you talking about Leia as the leader or Leia
Like,
as someone who's for happening?"
what is this? Like, I feel like that argument only makes sense in the context of like if you've read Resistance Reborn and like
And
maybe
I did not.
and you did it, and like even then it's kind of a stretch, and I'm like, why? What are they fighting? Like all of that, like his shyness and his like random argument would have made sense if Storm Pilot happened, because then you could just be like, he's just confused by his man crush. But like because then Storm Pilot didn't happen, I'm really like, I don't know what any of that was.
Yeah. I agree. If they had been together, I would have been okay. Your new relationship roles.
Yep,
Don't know how to tell someone we're good.
you're just
Although I
awkward.
will say,
Yeah.
like the moments where he's like, so we can't tell Poe. Like it
Hmm.
led to some funny moments where
Yeah.
even like this morning I was laughing,
Yeah.
and maybe it's because like I don't like that they made Poe Spice Runner.
That's
I
fair.
that actually that annoys me.
Hmm.
But like the moment where he's like, you were
Yeah.
a stormtrooper, you're a scavenger.
We can do this today.
Like
I love that
that's so
line.
funny.
Yeah.
It's such a good line. Or Finn's line where he's like, all that shifty stuff you
You do?
do.
It's like I love that line, but the first time I saw The Rise of Skywalker, I thought that line was funny, but I literally didn't understand what it was referencing to, because
Hmm.
until they said he was a spice runner, it made sense that a pilot with the resistance would know how to hotwire something, and I didn't think it was weird that he knew how to do it, and so I was really confused until they're like he's a spice runner, and then I was like,
Oh.
okay. I may well in my head, I'm like, I mean, I didn't finish the Poe comic yet, so maybe, but like, I don't know what's going on, but whatever.
So for a while I thought it was like, oh, so Finn does suddenly how Poe can do all these things. So he feels like Poe has a secret. So maybe
Hmm.
he's got a secret. Then
Right.
I was like, why does any of this need to and to be fair, I'm coming into that once again with the bias of I've quit so many shows where I'm like, if
Yeah.
y'all don't just talk to each other,
Right.
this is not good tension. If you just don't talk to each other, all your problems would go away and the season would be 2 episodes.
Right.
And so that's like a small pet peeve of mine with entertainment. So I did come in there with that bias where I was
Yeah.
like,
That's fair. Because like I really do think you could have given Poe a connection to Zori and Babu Frick without the Spice Runner past. Like
mm-hmm.
there was a way to do that, and like I don't have anybody who's upset by that is completely valid. I'm not the right person to comment on why that's a problem or not a problem. But even at a superficial level, I just think it was unnecessary, and I think that's probably what makes it worse is that it was
Mm-hmm.
unnecessary. It's like it's not even doing anything for anybody. Um, but I don't know. That's one of those things where it's I don't know why. Like, and for people who are mad about it from a canon reason, there've been harder things to solve in canon, so I'm not concerned about that. A lot of people have like picked that as their see. The movie didn't care about the canon, and I'm like, okay, like you haven't been watching Star Wars very long, clearly. There's this whole thing about Leia remembering her mother. I'm not sure you're familiar with it.
But yeah, representation, that
Yeah,
was my biggest,
yeah.
and that was something I didn't even think of until people
Pointed it
like
out.
Latinx
Yeah,
people were
and
like,
when
"Oh,"
it got
and
pointed
then
out, I was like, oh, okay, I can see it. I get you.
I support that. I think the other kind of going on the same track as Finn
Mhm.
is granted we only have our 3 movies,
Yep.
2 hours and change minutes.
Mhm.
I feel like Finn was never fully I was one of
I
those
no,
people
I
that
would
was
agree. I
like
would agree.
Team
I
Stormtrooper
completely agree.
Rebellion,
Mhm.
especially after he found Janna. I was like,
Yeah.
we know that they're taking these people. We're
Yeah.
gonna continue to shoot Stormtroopers, except I guess I just and this kind of I think goes in a little Clone Wars and
Mhm.
how actually like getting to know the clones and things, you start
Yeah.
thinking about what's happening to them. Because
Yep.
when I see the mask, I'm just like, oh, they're the bad guys, shoot them.
Mhm.
And I like stormtroopers,
Yeah.
and but once you start giving them that backstory, that's
Mhm.
one thing I like about the Clone Wars. Once they started giving them that backstory, they were like,
Mhm.
and now we're going to take responsibility of the fact that we gave you this backstory. Like, yeah, people still get shot, but like, there's a reaction, an
Right.
in-story reaction to that, and there
Yep.
was no in-story reaction. So I just maybe would have like even like a comment I
Right.
think,
And I think
or an
that's fair.
illusion.
I I was not one of the people expecting a stormtrooper rebellion personally, and I know a lot of people cited that scene that was cut from The Last Jedi, and I'm like, yeah, but it's a deleted scene, so that deleted scenes don't tell you about what's going to happen in the future because they were deleted. Um, but like I don't think it would have bothered me if there was a full scale rebellion. Again, it just happened to be like cluttered movie. I wasn't expecting it. But I agree there could have been some line from Finn or some kind of sadness of, oh, I found Janna and all of these other stormtroopers who got away, but then there's these. I My thing with Finn is, and I was saying this for a long time, I feel like he was twice a red herring, and I just really wanted him to not be a red herring in Rise of Skywalker, and that was like the one of the things I was really holding on because like I feel terrible. I feel like such a terrible Rey fan. Like I feel like a fake Rey fan because everyone's favorite scene from The Force Awakens is the saber grab where she holds the lightsaber,
Yeah.
and I remember seeing that I'm like and thinking, oh, that's cool. She's also gonna have the Force. And like that was my reaction of like clearly Finn,
Mm-hmm.
who was marketed as the main Jedi, he's gonna
Yeah.
have it, and then it's also Rey,
Yeah.
and then he wasn't, and then I'm like, so okay, so it was like a plot twist who the main character actually is, and then you get to Last Jedi, and I love the Last Jedi, but most of my gripes have to do with his storyline, and basically it's him. His whole storyline is to just find Rey, and it's his storyline is in service to Poe learning a lesson
Mm-hmm.
and like showing off Rose's character. And I love Rose, but and a lot of people are like, yeah, but he gets to fight Phasma. I'm like, yes, he gets to fight Phasma while serving Poe's story. Like both things can be true. And like even at the end when he's like going to sacrifice himself, like it's literally to show that Finn has not learned the lesson that Poe has just learned. Like even
Mm-hmm.
that big moment, people get distracted by it because it's a great Finn Rose moment, and they have their kiss, and it's a wonderful moment. But really, it's to show that Finn is now the brash hero that Poe was at the start of the movie, and Poe is the one who's like, no, don't jump into a cockpit and blow something up, and like it still bothers me. So like I
Mm-hmm.
get there's the beef that Finn just yells Rey's name a lot, and he does do that. He also yells everyone's name a lot. In fairness, like if you watch the beginning of the movie, he's literally like R2 and like slaps him, and I'm like, okay, he's just really excited to see R2. And it just so happens that Rey is the one who likes to walk off into deserts and be non-responsive. So like most of the
Yeah.
time when he's saying her name over and over again, it's because she's literally like, you know what I mean? So like there's a little bit more context there, I feel like. But the point is, the Finn from Force Awakens and Last Jedi would have gotten in the Falcon and chased Rey to Octo. And the Finn in The Rise of
Mm-hmm.
Skywalker was like, Rey's got to figure some stuff out now. I'm gonna go back to
Mm-hmm.
the Resistance base. And like, and then he's like, hey, look, Rey showed up, and she's gonna lead us to Exegol. And now is the time to follow Rey because now she's worked her stuff out. And like, I appreciated that moment for Finn, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah. So I agree. I'd
Mm-hmm.
seen the Star Trek films, and
Yep.
so that's what I was familiar of for JJ. But not familiar enough with his work to know about his mystery boxes and
Yeah.
misdirection and all that. So when I saw Finn with the Legacy Saber, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, Finn's our Jedi, let's go.
Yep.
And then when Rey got it, I was also like, that's Finn. In fact,
Yeah.
my one of my top favorite scenes in all of Star Wars, but definitely in The Force Awakens,
Yeah.
is that snow fight. But
Yeah.
my favorite part is the fight between Finn and Kylo. I
Yeah.
mean, I like the part between
Yeah.
Kylo and Rey, but my favorite part is the beginning one.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's the part that really drew me. And then I really appreciate the way you articulated Last Jedi because
Mm-hmm.
I love Rose. I'm
Mm-hmm.
one of those
Yep.
people that's like her time got robbed in
Yep.
the Rise of
That is
Skywalker.
my biggest gripe with The Rise of Skywalker.
And though when I just real quick when I
Mm-hmm.
went and I watched it this morning and he was like last chance Rose and she was like I got to study some old specs. I was like, "Do you? Do
Do
you
you
really?"
really?
Go on a space adventure. But and I fully understand the importance of the Canto Bight mission.
Mm-hmm.
More not really, well, okay, so from story perspective for Poe, but also this idea of saying who are the good guys, bad guys
Yeah.
in this war. I think about the super popular the Heroes on Both Sides episode,
Yep.
Clone Wars.
Yep.
I just recently watched that. I feel like it was that episode just in live action format.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I hope this doesn't come out wrong. So
Okay.
you can tell that Ryan cares about the stories he creates and the
Yep.
dialogue he writes and these characters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he loves Rose more than the other characters just because he created the concept of that character.
Yep.
So I'm not saying he doesn't give care to any of the scenes,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I feel like more importance and weight was given to Rey and Kylo and Luke, which makes sense
Yep.
because they're Rey and Kylo and Luke.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I think he put an important message in the Canto Bight scenes
Mm-hmm.
and they're important, and I don't think you should skip them, you can still tell that they're whatever more important than an afterthought is because they're not
Mm-hmm.
an afterthought, but
Right.
they're they're not the main story.
Yep.
And so I fully embrace the idea that they're a sideline, and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't sit right with me that after all this, Finn, even in this super important story,
Yeah.
could be a sideline, and
Yep.
then I don't think he was utilized enough in the Rise of Skywalker. Even without a
No. Yeah.
rebellion, I felt like it was a lot of chasing Rey. I
Yep.
would have liked maybe that moment when she was talking about seeing herself on the throne of the Sith. Instead of
Yep.
being super vague, we could actually have a conversation
Yep.
about this maybe.
Instead of them
And
constantly being
so
interrupted.
and so that's where I just think I wanted so much more Finn,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think I got it.
No, I would agree. Like, I don't think I got that one big Finn moment where I'm like, okay, this is everything I wanted. I do. For me, it even if it without that, I was just relieved that I don't feel like, unless I just haven't discovered it yet, I don't feel like he was a red herring in Rise of Skywalker. I like that he got to be co-general. I like that he got
Yeah.
to lead the charge on the Star Destroyer, which is the most ridiculous thing ever, and it's great. But like, I agree. I think he was a great character that just no one knew what to do with,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. And that, like, I feel like we need like a full Finn comic or novel or something, because
Yeah.
he's got a lot of story to tell that we just didn't
And
get.
and to his credit, John Boyega acted the heck out
Oh
of all the
yeah,
scenes
he
he
did.
was given. Like
Yup.
I believe, even when I was like convinced because I want more, I was still like, I'm convinced. Look at the faces he's making and the
Yep.
way his voicing.
Yep.
So
He did that amazing. And with your point with Rose, I kind of get why Rose didn't go on the main adventure, but my argument is like, and I know a couple people who are like the super Claude stands might disagree, but I'm like, she could have, like, you could have solved so much of this by putting her on the Falcon for that opening scene instead of Claude. Like, she still
yeah.
wouldn't have been in the movie as much as everyone would have wanted, but she would have had like a critical scene with a critical role, and it would have showed that she could leave the base.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would have at least made it palpable to people versus what we got, which was, I'm gonna walk around and ask questions for the point of the plot.
Oh no. I completely feel that. Although that leads me to the question, did you believe in the trio? Because marketing said there was a trio, and I believed in the relationship between Finn and Rey, and I believed Finn and Poe. I leading up to it, I was like, I don't believe in no trio. But the scene where Rey and Poe were like bickering over BB-8 and the Falcon being on fire, I was like, I believe this.
Yep.
Daisy and Oscar are selling this for me. Yeah,
Yep.
they've been like the entire time.
I think it's a very fair critique to say that they were never together. And that maybe seeing that relation, like, if you feel like you needed to see that relationship earned on screen, we didn't get that. That said, I don't really have too much of a problem buying it. I kind of see like their friend group dynamic is, I don't know if you've ever been in a friend group where like there's people who are only in the group because of like that one cohesive person. Like Finn, like I feel this glue that just kind of brings people together. And so that's where I could even buy like their bickering, is they're like, okay, I gotta love you because both like best friends with the same guy, but like also you're infuriating. And like I've been in friend groups like that, so I could totally see it. And I think it's just something different than what we've seen from other like Star Wars trios or Star Wars groups. But like I get the argument. I get the argument that if you didn't see it a lot ahead of time and um you didn't feel like it was earned, like I understand why that upset people, but I also really liked them together and I thought it worked really well.
Hmm. I also have to say this is a minor thing that I saw, but I actually really like that Poe was flying the Falcon a
Yep.
lot. Actually, I don't mind that that happened.
Mhm.
One day in life, I would have wanted Ben flying it.
Yes.
I get why that doesn't work for the purposes of what we got in the movie and the
Yep.
time and the pacing of the movie. So if
Yep.
someone wants to give me like before Kylo Ben chilling in the
Yeah.
cockpit and a
Yep.
comic or a book, I
Yep.
will take it. I don't know
Yep.
if that exists, but I'll take it. But that's one of the things where I was like, this is great. Just pass around Han ship. That's dope to me.
I think it's you know, then the Falcon becomes a little bit of a thing for everybody.
Speaking of,
Yeah.
one of my biggest fears was that Lando would die. And
Oh
I'm
yeah.
really glad he didn't.
I'm really
Um
glad too. He was great. I was a little bit worried about how he was going to fit into the story because it felt like, all right, let's bring in one more legacy character, and I'm like, all right. But then I was totally sold once we got to the movie.
yeah. As much as I was just like, less legacy characters when they announced, I was like, this is what we've gotten, so I expect it.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been weird if at some point you didn't at least mention him.
Yep.
So yay for you coming. Yeah.
Yep. So I think that's good too. Um, Look, I really hate to cut this short, but I've gotten like so many texts from my folks who really want to eat with me.
Okay.
So, but we should do this again, and if not about Rise of Skywalker, just talk about more. Dale has already voted in chat that you need to be a guest more often. So
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Oh my goodness, we could talk about anything. I don't think anyone can tell, but like I'm wearing my Mandalorian shirt today. I'm in love with the
nice,
Mandalorian, so you can talk about anything. I'm down for
heck
anything.
yeah. But so we'll have to call it here. But definitely check out the podcast, Unmistakably Star Wars. It's a great podcast, and a lot of my favorite people are on it, including Gina. Um,
Yeah.
And but thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this really wonderful discussion where we could agree or disagree or just have conversations about things. I think that's so important.
Thank
Um,
you for having me. Thank you for letting me say controversial
oh,
stuff.
controversial stuff. We're so hard hitting over here. It was a good discussion and it felt good. So we'll definitely have you on again if you would be so kind to join us again.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
but I'll go ahead and throw up the end title card. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for being here. And we'll
Bye.
talk to you all soon. Bye.